So tell us who you are, please.
My name is Jessica Sanchez. I'm 20.
Before the lights, the standing ovations, and the golden confetti that marked her legendary return, Jessica Sanchez almost missed the moment that started it all. Long before millions knew her name, she was just a quiet teenager, unsure of her place, teetering on the edge of backing out from a life-changing opportunity. According to those close to her, Jessica hadn't planned to audition at all. The America's Got Talent stage wasn't in her immediate future until a single, unexpected phone call tipped the scales. That call, from someone urging her not to give up on the chance, became the first domino in a chain reaction that would eventually lead her to national fame. It's the kind of moment we often overlook in success stories, a moment of hesitation, of self-doubt. But it's what makes her journey so deeply human. That one decision didn't just launch a singer's career, it redirected the course of a life. And as fans saw her take the AGT stage in 2025, poised and pregnant, few knew that the same woman who sang with such strength had once nearly let her dreams slip through her fingers. But Jessica's story wasn't just about talent, it was about choice. A single, crucial choice to say yes. And what followed would defy expectations, rewrite reality show history, and prove that the most extraordinary voices often come from those who almost stayed silent. Long before Jessica Sanchez captivated national audiences, she was a little girl growing up in Chula Vista, California, a child born into a working-class household that blended discipline, culture, and a whole lot of music. Her mother, Adida, a proud Filipina, and her father, Gilbert, a Mexican-American Navy veteran, built their family on the foundation of resilience. While others chased comfort, the Sanchezes worked tirelessly to instill grit in their children. And for Jessica, music wasn't a choice. It was in her DNA. In that home, singing wasn't something that happened on special occasions. It was part of daily life. Family gatherings transformed into full-blown karaoke battles. The walls pulsed with the echoes of soulful R&B, pop anthems, and traditional ballads. At just 2 years old, Jessica's voice stunned everyone who heard it, not just because of its beauty, but because of its control and emotional depth. Her parents encouraged her to perform for anyone who'd listen, relatives, neighbors, even strangers at community events. By age 5, it was undeniable. This child wasn't merely gifted, she was extraordinary. But it wasn't until she stood on the stage of Harlem's famed Apollo Theater at just 10 years old, belting out Aretha Franklin's Respect, that the transformation became clear. The shy girl from the West Coast became a powerhouse under the spotlight, channeling pain, pride, and possibility through every note. Her cultural roots shaped not only her voice, but her entire approach to music. In Filipino tradition, music is a tool for storytelling and emotion. From her Mexican heritage, she inherited a sense of rhythm and soul. This fusion didn't just define her style, it laid the groundwork for a voice that would one day shake stadiums and silence skeptics. Jessica wasn't just raised to sing. She was raised to fight, to persist, and to stand tall in a world that often demands silence from girls like her. Years before she became a household name, Jessica Sanchez had already stepped onto the America's Got Talent stage, but almost no one remembers it. That's because her first encounter with the show in 2006, during its inaugural season, was quietly buried beneath the noise of a fledgling format, still trying to find its identity. She was just 11 years old, barely tall enough to command the stage, yet powerful enough to stop the judges in their tracks with a voice that seemed to defy her age. One of those judges, R&B icon Brandy Norwood, recognized the spark instantly, praising Jessica's performance as something rare. But despite her undeniable talent and the praise she received, Jessica was eliminated during the semifinals. And shockingly, her performance never even made it to air. There was no dramatic montage, no farewell package, no recognition of her potential. It was as if she had never been there at all. Behind the scenes, Brandy reportedly pushed for her return, advocating for her as a wild card contestant. Rare gesture that showed how deeply her brief appearance resonated with at least one person on the panel. For Jessica, the elimination was more than just a disappointment. It was a painful introduction to the brutal side of the entertainment industry, where even brilliance can be erased by editing decisions. But instead of letting that early rejection define her, she internalized the moment. She didn't lash out. She didn't quit. She simply absorbed the lesson that talent alone isn't always enough. That visibility can vanish in the blink of an eye. It was a kind of scar that doesn't show but never fades. The AGT stage had rejected her once, but in doing so, it had unknowingly planted the seeds of her resilience. That forgotten chapter became a foundational part of her story, one that would later make her return all the more powerful. Because the girl the world ignored in 2006 was the same woman who, 2 decades later, would make it impossible to look away. When Jessica Sanchez walked onto the American Idol stage in 2011, she wasn't a viral sensation or a media darling. She was a 16-year-old girl carrying the invisible weight of a past rejection and a fierce determination to never be overlooked again. Her audition in San Diego stunned the judges. Singing Celine Dion's The Prayer, Jessica delivered a performance so emotionally controlled, so vocally precise, that even the most seasoned panelists were left speechless. Week after week, she tackled songs that most professionals would avoid. Whitney Houston's I Will Always Love You, Jennifer Holiday's, and I Am Telling You I'm Not Going. These weren't performances, they were declarations. But just as she was beginning to feel unstoppable, the unthinkable happened. Mid-season, America voted her off. It was one of the most controversial eliminations in Idol history. Jennifer Lopez, visibly shaken, used the judges' one and only save of the season to bring Jessica back, an unprecedented move that sent a clear message. The world wasn't ready to lose her yet. And Jessica? She didn't crumble. She came back stronger, turning every performance into a masterclass. Though she ultimately finished runner-up to Philip Phillips, many believed she had far surpassed him vocally. But what Jessica gained was more than a trophy. It was a legacy. She became a cultural icon, especially within Filipino and Mexican-American communities who saw themselves represented on a massive scale for the first time. Her presence on that stage wasn't just about music. It was about visibility, about shattering stereotypes, and proving that young women of color could lead the narrative. What the audience didn't realize was that her composure under pressure, her flawless delivery, her ability to rise from defeat, all of it was born years earlier, forged during her quiet AGT rejection. American Idol didn't make Jessica Sanchez. It revealed her. It showed the world what a fighter looks like when she finally gets her voice back. And though the title slipped through her fingers, what she claimed was far more powerful. Ownership of her artistry, her story, and her worth. After her breathtaking run on American Idol, Jessica Sanchez should have been on the fast track to superstardom. She had the voice, the fan base, and the critical acclaim. Record labels took notice immediately, and before long, she signed with Interscope Records, surrounded by a dream team of industry heavyweights. Her debut album Me, You, and the Music was stacked with names like Neo, Toby Gad, and Harvey Mason Jr., a lineup that signaled big commercial ambitions. Her lead single, Tonight, a radio-ready duet with Neo, was sleek, polished, and brimming with mainstream appeal. The album debuted at number 26 on the Billboard 200, not a failure by industry standards, but a far cry from the explosive impact everyone had expected. But the numbers weren't the real problem. The real problem was that the music didn't sound like Jessica Sanchez. Critics praised her technical brilliance, but questioned the album's identity. Fans who had fallen in love with her powerhouse ballads and raw emotional delivery found themselves wondering where that artist had gone. Behind the scenes, Jessica was being pulled in every direction. Executives told her what to sing, how to dress, and what image would sell. Her performances were calculated, her interviews scripted. At just 17, she was no longer a singer, she was a product. And it showed. The girl who had once stood tall on the Idol stage, belting out songs that gave people chills, now looked like she was playing a role written by someone else. Even as she made her acting debut on Glee, an opportunity she took seriously, enrolling in acting classes beforehand. Her true artistic voice was fading. In later interviews, Jessica confessed that during this time, her passion for music had started to disappear. What had once been a source of joy and expression now felt like obligation. She was going through the motions, chasing someone else's vision of success. It was a pain. Beneath the spotlight, Jessica Sanchez was fighting a silent war. To the public, she was still that polished, poised artist with a golden voice. But behind the scenes, she was unraveling, caught in the crosshairs of an industry that wanted her talent, but not her truth. As a young woman of mixed Filipino and Mexican descent, Jessica didn't fit easily into the rigid categories that the music industry preferred. She was seen as too ethnic for some audiences, too mainstream for others, never quite the right mold for labels desperate to define her by stereotypes. Instead of celebrating her multicultural identity, executives treated it as a marketing hurdle. She was told what to wear, how to act, even how to feel in interviews and photo shoots. Her voice was revered, but her perspective was muted. And while she smiled on red carpets and delivered flawless vocals on stage, her soul was being chipped away behind the curtain. In private, she struggled with anxiety, identity confusion, and a growing sense of detachment from the very art form that once gave her life. Every decision, every track listing, every magazine cover, every endorsement came with invisible strings. The music no longer came from her heart. It came from a conference room. Her passion, once uncontainable, now felt like an act of survival. She began questioning everything: her image, her career, even her place in an industry that didn't seem to value authenticity. The dissonance between who she truly was and who she was being asked to be became suffocating. Even her moments of public triumph, like performing at the Democratic National Convention or singing the national anthem at NFL games, felt more like obligations than celebrations. Jessica later revealed that in these years, she didn't recognize the version of herself being promoted. She was surviving, not thriving, performing without feeling, smiling without meaning. And the deeper she sank into this performance of someone else's dream, the clearer it became. If she didn't reclaim her voice soon, she would lose it completely. It was a quiet descent, invisible to fans, but all-consuming to her. And yet, even in that darkness, the fire hadn't gone out. It was dimmed, but not extinguished. At a time when most rising stars chase more fame, Jessica Sanchez made a radical choice. She stepped away, not with a dramatic exit or a tabloid scandal, but with quiet defiance. She walked out of the industry machine and into uncertainty, turning down the volume of the world so she could finally hear her own voice again. For many, it looked like she had simply disappeared, another teenage sensation swallowed by the noise of newer trends. But behind that silence was intention. Jessica wasn't giving up, she was healing. The burnout was real. Years of being told what to sing, how to dress, and who to be had left her emotionally hollow. So instead of chasing radio play or headline tours, she chose something far more difficult: authenticity. In the years that followed, Jessica began releasing music independently, stripped down, soul-bearing tracks like This Love, Stronger Together, and Us. There were no flashy visuals, no choreographed hype, just her voice and her truth. Gone were the glossy pop formulas. In their place stood lyrics that reflected heartbreak, self-discovery, and quiet strength. She no longer asked what would sell, she asked what felt honest. And in doing so, she reconnected not just with her art, but with herself. Her shows became smaller, her audience more intimate, but the connection deeper than ever. Fans who had followed her since Idol saw a different side of Jessica, not the industry-crafted starlet, but the artist she had always longed to become. She engaged directly with her listeners online, speaking candidly about mental health, identity, and the struggle to remain real in a world obsessed with image. She stopped chasing industry approval and started building a new foundation, brick by brick, on her own terms. And though these years lacked the glitter of TV cameras or magazine covers, they were transformative. Jessica wasn't just finding her voice again, she was reclaiming it. The music felt like home. The silence gave her clarity. And somewhere in that stillness, the fire reignited. She had once been groomed for stardom. Now, she was growing into something bigger, an artist with nothing to prove and everything to say. Her voice hadn't disappeared. It had just been waiting for the right moment to rise again. In 2025, nearly 20 years after her quiet elimination from America's Got Talent's very first season, Jessica Sanchez returned. But this time, she wasn't a forgotten contestant hoping for redemption. She was a woman who had walked through the fire, shed the industry's illusions, and emerged with something more potent than fame: self-possession. When she stepped onto the AGT stage once again, the transformation was immediate and undeniable. Gone was the wide-eyed child from 2006. In her place stood a mature, composed, and radiant woman, pregnant with her first child, cradling life while preparing to deliver something else equally powerful: truth. She sang Benson Boone's Beautiful Things, not as a showpiece, but as a confessional. With no elaborate staging, no backup dancers, and no vocal gymnastics, she let her voice do what it was always meant to do: tell a story. Every note carried years of heartbreak and healing. Every breath held decades of unspoken pain and hard-earned peace. The room, often filled with cheers and gasps, fell silent. Time seemed to pause. Judges held their breath. Audience members blinked back tears. And when the final note rang out, a note as fragile as it was fierce, the silence that followed was heavier than applause. Then, the eruption. Standing ovations, emotional outbursts, and finally, Sofia Vergara rising to her feet, slamming the golden buzzer with raw urgency. As golden confetti rained down, Jessica dropped to her knees, one hand on her belly, the other covering her face in disbelief. It was not just a performance, it was a moment of reckoning. Simon Cowell, who had never judged her during her idol journey, leaned forward and said, "I think they like you." A simple remark carrying decades of meaning. Howie Mandel called it roof-blowing. Mel B declared her more than a singer. She was a storyteller. And the truth was undeniable. Jessica wasn't there to audition. She was there to reclaim. That golden buzzer wasn't just a symbol of approval. It was a full-circle triumph, a silent promise made good. The girl who had once been edited out had returned, and this time, no one could silence her. Jessica Sanchez had not come back for validation. She came back because she no longer needed it. The moment Jessica Sanchez hit that final note on the AGT stage, her story ignited across the internet like a spark meeting dry grass. Within minutes, social media platforms lit up with tributes, memories, and disbelief. Longtime fans, many of whom had watched her grow up on American Idol, flooded the digital space with emotional reflections. "I grew up watching her," one post read. "Now I'm crying watching her stand stronger than ever." For those who had followed her early career, it wasn't just a performance. It was closure, redemption, and inspiration bundled into a single televised moment. For newer viewers, the shock was even greater. Many didn't realize that this powerhouse vocalist, now visibly pregnant and radiating quiet strength, had once been silently eliminated from AGT's very first season without a trace. Comment sections across YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram turned into digital monuments, testaments to resilience, visibility, and the unglamorous reality of being overlooked in an industry obsessed with novelty. Artists who had felt silenced, audiences who had felt unseen, all found something in Jessica's return that transcended the stage. But what stood out most was how Jessica herself responded, not with bitterness or revenge, but with grace and clarity. She didn't seek to rewrite the past. She simply reclaimed the pen. Simon Cowell's simple nod of approval, usually a formality, carried real weight this time. His unspoken recognition was louder than a monologue. Howie Mandel and Mel B emphasized not just her vocal prowess, but her evolution into a storyteller. A woman who had lived through storms and now used her voice as a bridge between pain and peace. Jessica had done what few artists ever achieve. She had weaponized vulnerability. She didn't return as a product of television, but as a force shaped by life, loss, and reflection. Her AGT performance was no longer just a song. It was a live rewriting of her legacy in real time. It told the world that time doesn't dilute true talent. It deepens it. And in that moment, under a golden rain of confetti, Jessica Sanchez reminded millions that a comeback isn't about where you've been. It's about who you've become. Behind the viral videos, the standing ovations, and the glowing headlines lies the true heartbeat of Jessica Sanchez's legacy. A legacy not built on spotlight, but on perseverance in its absence. Long before millions